In a snow-covered New Hampshire town, Adam Fenwick had built a life where nothing and no one was allowed to depend on him. Then a German shepherd named Clove began stealing his work gloves and carrying them 3 streets away. Each missing glove led Adam back to an old print shop, a stubborn woman, and a bridge the whole town needed, but no one wanted to claim. Clove understood none of the legal papers, the rusted steel, or the money behind the dispute. She only knew when people were drifting apart, and she refused to let them stay that way. What followed was not the story of one man saving a town, but of a town learning how to carry the weight together. Tell us where you're watching from, and if this story moves you, please like and subscribe to help us reach 5,000 subscribers and keep more stories like this alive. January came to Briar Glen beneath a pale blue sky that looked almost polished. Snow rested on the roofs in clean white slopes. Bare maple branches glittered with frozen droplets whenever the sun cleared the ridge. Along Main Street, chimneys breathed steadily into the cold, and the old brick storefronts seemed to huddle closer together against the wind. Adam Fenwick watched the morning form through the upper window of his apartment. At 55, he had learned not to trust beautiful weather. The brighter the winter sky, the harder the cold usually bit. He stood at the narrow kitchen counter in a charcoal Henley and dark work trousers, drinking coffee from a chipped enamel mug. His hair, brown-gray and silver at the temples, was cut close at the sides and longer on top. He had combed it back out of habit, though a single pale strand had already fallen across his forehead. Below him, Fenwick Mechanical waited in silence. The shop occupied the ground floor of a building that had once housed a feed store. Adam had replaced the sagging doors, reinforced the joists, rewired the entire place, and installed a furnace large enough to keep steel tools from becoming painful to touch. He had done almost everything himself. That was how he preferred it. By 7, the garage door was open, and the first machine of the day sat dripping snowmelt onto the concrete floor. It was a red snow blower belonging to the town pharmacist, though Adam knew the machine better than he knew the pharmacist. The auger belt had cracked. The drive cable had stretched. Someone had tried to fix both with electrical tape and optimism. Adam did not hold optimism in high mechanical regard. He worked with the steady economy of a man whose hands rarely needed to ask his mind what came next. His shoulders were broad beneath an olive-drab combat shirt, its fitted torso worn smooth from use, its camouflage sleeves rolled neatly to the forearms. There were no patches, no insignia, nothing decorative. He liked the shirt because it did not catch on moving parts. He had once spent his winters inside paper mills, hydroplants, and bridge housings, maintaining lift motors, bearing assemblies, expansion joints, and anti-icing systems, work that kept towns moving without attracting much notice. 6 years earlier, when his wife Ruth became too ill to be left alone for long, Adam had stopped traveling. He opened the shop. He moved them into the apartment upstairs. He learned medication schedules, oxygen levels, the timing of pain, and the subtle difference between Ruth needing help and Ruth pretending she did not. After she died, Adam kept the schedule. He still woke before 6, still checked the thermostat twice, still bought groceries every Thursday, still listened for movement from the bedroom after midnight. Only there was no movement now. The habit remained after the person was gone, like a machine left running after the belt had slipped free. At 8:15, Floyd Red pushed through the side door carrying a metal coffee pot. Floyd owned the lantern spoon 2 blocks away and possessed the round, red-cheeked appearance of a man who had spent 30 years standing over soup. His silver mustache moved before the rest of his face whenever he spoke. "You have a front door," Adam said without looking up. It was locked. That was information. Floyd set the coffee pot beside the workbench. "You coming in for lunch?" "No." "Dinner?" "No." "Tomorrow?" "No." Floyd poured coffee into Adam's mug anyway. A man cannot live on burnt coffee, canned stew, and mechanical superiority. I have a roof that doesn't leak, a breathtaking standard, and good wrenches. Yes, Adam, the 3 pillars of civilization. Adam glanced at him. Floyd smiled, pleased to have won the smallest possible reaction. You know, some people enjoy company. Some people enjoy accordion music. That is not a defense. Floyd left the coffee and went back into the cold. Adam resumed work. By 10, the snowblower ran cleanly. By 11, he had replaced a failed relay in a portable generator. At noon, he ate half a ham sandwich standing beside the furnace. That was when Clove appeared. She did not arrive with a bark or a scratch at the door. She simply stood in the open bay, framed by brightness. Clove was a 6-year-old German shepherd with a golden honey coat beneath a dark black saddle. Her mask was uneven, rising higher around her right eye than the left, giving her face a permanent look of skeptical curiosity. Her left ear stood perfectly straight, the right tipped slightly outward at the top. Snow clung to her whiskers. A brick-red leather collar circled her neck, stitched with a narrow reflective band. From it hung a brass tag shaped like a maple leaf. Clove. Adam looked at the tag, then at the dog. No. Clove stepped inside. Her paws made soft wet marks across the concrete. You have a home? Clove walked past him and lowered herself beside the furnace. Adam stared. Clove closed her eyes. The shop grew quiet again, but not in the same way. There was now breathing in it, besides his own. Adam tried to ignore her. He sorted sockets, logged repairs, called the pharmacist, and said the snowblower was ready. Every few minutes, he found himself looking toward the furnace. Clove had made herself comfortable with astonishing moral confidence. At 1 o'clock, Adam carried an old alternator to the far bench. He set his leather gloves beside the vise. They were cognac brown, darkened at the palms, softened by years of use. When he turned back, one was gone. Clove stood near the door with it held carefully by the cuff. Adam froze. Put that down. Clove's ears lifted. Clove. Her tail moved once, then she ran. Adam followed her into the street without putting on his coat. The cold struck him immediately. Clove did not bolt at random. She turned onto the narrow river path behind the shops, a familiar packed trail sheltered by maples and low stone walls. She moved quickly, but never disappeared from sight. Every dozen yards she looked back. Adam walked faster. I am not chasing you. Clove trotted faster. He hated that this made the statement less convincing. The path passed behind Lantern Spoon, where Floyd stood at the kitchen window holding a ladle. Floyd saw the dog. Then he saw Adam. His entire face brightened with unbearable delight. Adam pointed at him in warning and kept going. 3 streets from the shop, Clove turned through a narrow gate beneath a faded black sign. Wynn Letterpress St., 1941. The building was made of red brick with tall front windows clouded slightly at the corners. Gold lettering peeled from the glass. Inside, old presses stood in ordered rows beneath hanging lamps. Clove pushed through a door that had not fully latched. Adam entered after her. The air smelled of iron, oil, paper, and dry ink. A woman stood behind a long wooden counter, arranging small metal letters in a composing stick. Beatrice Wynn was 68, slender and upright, with silver-white hair cut in a precise bob. A red clip held one side away from her face. Cat-eye reading glasses rested low on her nose. Clove placed Adam's glove at Beatrice's feet. Beatrice looked down. Then she looked at Adam. I see the outreach program is working. Adam removed his glasses, which had fogged in the warmth. That is my glove. Yes, it has made quite an emotional journey. Your dog stole it. Clove does not steal. She ran away with it. She relocates objects in the interest of social repair. Adam looked at Clove. Clove sat beside Beatrice, breathing lightly, her expression innocent enough to be offensive. "Give it back." Beatrice picked up the glove and placed it on the counter. Her fingers moved carefully, and Adam noticed the slight stiffness in them. "You could have simply visited," she said. "I had not planned to." "That is why she brought transportation." "It is a glove." "For you, apparently, the difference is narrow." Adam took it. Behind Beatrice, a small platen press stood freshly oiled. Several drawers of lead type had been pulled open. On a drying rack, black lettering showed through sheets of thick cream paper. Public notice. Alder Crossing Access Review. Adam read only the first line. Beatrice saw him reading. "It is not contagious," she said. "What isn't?" "Concern. I have work. So does everyone." Adam put the glove into his back pocket. "Keep your dog out of my shop." Beatrice glanced down at Clove. "You heard him. Next time, knock." Adam left before she could say more. By Wednesday, Clove returned. This time she waited until Adam was beneath a pickup truck changing a frozen brake line. When he rolled out, one glove was missing. He found her standing at the edge of the river path. "No." Clove ran. At Wynn Letterpress, Beatrice was adjusting ink rollers. "The program shows promise," she said. "Your door is 3 streets away." "And yet you found it twice." The second glove came back with a faint streak of black ink across the cuff. Adam told himself he was annoyed by the stain. He did not tell himself that he had noticed the press was properly maintained. On Friday, Clove did it again. By then, Adam had begun putting the gloves farther from the furnace. He placed them on a shelf above shoulder height. Clove waited until he climbed a ladder to check the shop heater. She rose onto her hind legs, hooked one glove down with her teeth, and slipped through the door. Adam saw the entire thing. He stood on the ladder in silence. Then he laughed once. It escaped him before he could stop it, a rough, unused sound. Clove paused outside. She looked back. For the first time, Adam had the strange impression that she was not merely waiting for him to follow. She was checking whether he still could. At the print shop, Beatrice was feeding paper into the small press. Her movements were controlled but slow. One hand trembled when she reached for the lever. Adam noticed. He also noticed the notices had multiplied. Some mentioned temporary winter access limitations. Others referred to maintenance responsibility review. None said plainly that the bridge might become difficult or impossible for certain people to use. "What is happening with Alder Bridge?" he asked. Beatrice stopped the press. There was no victory in her face. That unsettled him more than sarcasm would have. "A dispute," she said. "Old ownership, older promises, new money. Not my kind of repair." "No," Beatrice said. "Paper is much more dangerous than steel. Steel usually admits when it is failing." Clove leaned against Adam's leg. He moved away. She leaned again. Adam collected his glove. "I am not getting involved." "I did not ask you to." "You printed notices." "I print many things, wedding cards, funeral cards, occasionally warnings no one wishes to read." Adam looked at the racks of paper, the black letters drying beneath the warm lamps. He thought of expansion joints splitting under hidden ice, bearings wearing down inside housings no one inspected because the bridge still stood. Then he turned away. Outside, the snow had begun again. That evening, Adam locked the shop at 7 and climbed the stairs to his apartment. He heated canned beef stew, ate half of it, and placed the rest in the refrigerator. The rooms were quiet. Too quiet, though he disliked that phrase because it suggested quiet had done something wrong. At 9, he heard a faint thump below. He took the flashlight from the drawer and went downstairs. Clove lay beside the furnace. Snow had melted into a dark circle beneath her. Her head rested across the toes of Adam's work boots, as if she had selected them specifically to keep him from leaving. "You cannot stay here." Clove opened one amber eye. Adam crouched and checked her collar. The brass tag was cold. The reflective stitching gleamed when the flashlight passed over it. She was not lost. She was not frightened. She had simply come back. Beside her front paws lay Adam's other glove, the matching one. It had been placed carefully on the concrete, clean and undamaged. Adam looked toward the locked door, then toward the dark windows. 3 streets away, somewhere beyond the snowfall, Wynn letterpress would be closing for the night. He thought of Beatrice working alone with her stiff hands. He thought of Floyd leaving coffee he had not asked for. He thought of how many years he had spent arranging his life so no one would wait for him. Clove shifted forward and rested her head more firmly on his boots. Adam sat down on the low wooden step beside the furnace. He did not pet her, not yet, but he did not send her home. For a while they listened to the furnace hum and the snow whisper against the windows. And on the concrete between them, the 2 gloves finally made a pair. By the following Monday, the cold had sharpened. The river beneath Alder Bridge moved in dark, narrow channels between shelves of ice. Snow had packed along the wooden planks, leaving a single path worn smooth by boots. From a distance, the bridge looked almost delicate. An old steel span stretched between 2 white banks, its trusses carrying a lacework of frost. Up close, it showed its age. Rust darkened the lower joints. Several boards had been replaced with newer lumber that did not quite match. Near the eastern end, one railing leaned inward by less than an inch, the kind of flaw most people would never notice, and Adam Fenwick would notice immediately. He did not go near it that morning. He could see the bridge from the back window of Fenwick Mechanical, and that was close enough. Clove had gone home before dawn on Saturday after sleeping beside the furnace as if Adam's shop had always been one of her approved residences. He had opened the door at 6, and she had trotted down the river path without ceremony. She had left both gloves behind. Adam told himself that was the end of it. At 9, Floyd Red arrived carrying a cardboard tray with 2 coffees and a folded town bulletin tucked beneath his arm. Adam looked at the tray. "You've increased your campaign." "I am adapting to resistance." "I have coffee." "You have a dark fluid made from punishment." Floyd set the tray on the workbench and unfolded the bulletin. A public notice had been printed in narrow black type. Alder Crossing Temporary Access and Maintenance Review. Adam continued tightening the casing on a furnace motor. "You read that?" Floyd asked. "No. You are looking directly at it." "I am looking past it." Floyd leaned both hands on the bench. "They may close the bridge. Then people will use another road. The nearest pedestrian route is almost 4 miles longer. There is a highway, with no sidewalk." Adam set down the wrench. Floyd's face had lost its usual ease. Without the smile, his silver mustache seemed less comic and more like a line drawn beneath a difficult thought. "My dinner cook lives north of the river," Floyd said. "So does Maribel from the pharmacy. When the Ridge Road ices over, they walk the bridge. Then the town should maintain it. The town says part of the approach belongs to Beatrice. Then Beatrice should maintain it. Her insurance company says the town owns the structure." Adam looked at him. Floyd lifted both hands. "Exactly." The problem had the shape Adam disliked most. Several people had touched it. No one had recorded what they had done, and now everyone claimed the missing piece belonged to someone else. He returned to the motor. "Not my repair." Floyd sighed. "That sentence is doing a great deal of work lately." The history of Alder Bridge had never been simple. The old Briar Glen Paper Company had built it in 1938, so mill workers living north of the river could reach the plant without walking along the freight road. When the mill closed decades later, the company transferred the steel span to the town. The eastern approach, however, crossed a strip of land later purchased by the Wynn family. Somewhere in the transfer papers was a permanent public easement. Somewhere else was an agreement dividing maintenance costs among the town, the property owner, and an industrial trust that no longer existed. The trust had dissolved. The paper mill had been demolished. The town had reorganized its public works department twice. Each change had preserved enough paperwork to create obligation and lost enough to create doubt. For years, the bridge survived because small repairs were cheaper than asking who legally had to approve them. That arrangement ended when Carson Penn arrived. His black SUV stopped outside Wynn Letterpress shortly before noon. Carson stepped onto the snow wearing a camel wool coat over a charcoal sweater and navy trousers. At 52, he carried himself with polished restraint. His dark hair, graying at the temples, had been combed neatly back. Even his winter boots seemed designed to suggest that mud was an administrative problem. Beatrice watched him enter from behind the composing table. Clove rose from her rug but did not bark. "Mrs. Wynn," Carson said, removing his gloves. "Miss Wynn. My apologies. You made the same mistake last time. Then I owe you 2 apologies." Beatrice did not offer him a chair. Carson placed a leather folder on the counter. "I've revised the purchase proposal." The word revised usually means the number grew larger and the problem remained the same. The number did grow larger. That must be exhausting for it. Carson gave a brief smile, but it did not reach his eyes. The offer was generous. It would cover Beatrice's debts, the repairs the building needed, and the surgery she had postponed twice. Carson's planned Riverside Lodge would bring construction work, winter tourism, and a new tax base to a town that had watched its storefronts empty one by one. But the bank financing the project wanted guaranteed control of the eastern approach. No uncertainty. No public path crossing a private construction zone. No bridge whose users might create liability. Beatrice turned the last page with stiff fingers. "You are not buying a print shop," she said. "You are buying a gate. I am buying land necessary to make the project viable." "And afterward?" "The public could still have access under regulated conditions." "Regulated by whom? The property owner? You?" "Yes." Beatrice closed the folder. Clove moved closer to her chair. Carson's voice softened. "The building is expensive to heat. Your insurance is being reviewed. Your hands need treatment. I am offering you a way out before the bridge becomes a legal burden." That is a very elegant sentence. It is also true. Elegant sentences often are, in carefully selected sections. Carson reached into the folder and removed a bound report. The cover bore the name of a regional engineering consultancy. Colored tabs marked several appendices. "The lender commissioned an assessment," he said. "The bridge may present significant structural risk." Beatrice did not touch it. "You want me to believe a bank paid to discover danger and was fortunate enough to discover exactly the danger its borrower required. I want you to read the findings. I want you to leave." Carson did not threaten her. That would have been easier. Instead, he put his gloves back on, buttoned his coat, and left the report on the counter. At the door, he paused. "If someone is injured, Miss Wynn, the question of who owns what will not protect anyone." After he left, the room seemed colder despite the radiators. Beatrice stood still for several seconds. Then she picked up the report. Clove pressed her shoulder against Beatrice's leg. The report reached Lena Orton 2 days later. Lena arrived in Briar Glen in a state-issued utility vehicle with salt-dried white along its doors. She was 47, lean, composed, and dressed in a cobalt inspection jacket over a gray turtleneck. A white hard hat with a blue reflective stripe rested on the passenger seat. Her black hair was tied low at the back of her neck. A small scar crossed the skin above her right eyebrow. It gave her face a permanent suggestion of concentration. Lena had grown up in Briar Glen. She had also spent 15 years avoiding it whenever her assignments allowed. Years earlier, as a junior inspector, she had warned the town that a failed drainage system near the old municipal lot would damage the retaining wall. The council delayed repairs through 2 budget cycles. When part of the wall collapsed during spring thaw, the same council asked why no one had warned them strongly enough. Lena transferred out that summer. Now she stood inside Wynn letterpress with Carson's report open beneath a lamp. "This is not a full structural inspection," she said. Beatrice folded her arms. "It has enough pages to be one." "Pages are not measurements." Lena turned to an appendix. "Most of the load data is from a 2018 municipal review. The corrosion projections assume no maintenance after that date." "There was maintenance. Do you have records?" "Some." "Some is not a useful engineering quantity." Beatrice gave her a hard look. Lena did not look away. She distrusted Carson's report, but she distrusted convenient outrage just as much. A bridge did not become safe because the person questioning it had bad motives. She moved to another page. "This photograph may not be Alder Bridge." Beatrice leaned closer. The image showed a corroded lower cord, flaking badly around a connection plate. "The rivet pattern is wrong," Lena said. "Alder has staggered rows at this joint. These are paired." "So the report is false." "I did not say that." "It contains a photograph of another bridge." "It may contain a mislabeled image. That is serious. It does not automatically invalidate every conclusion." Beatrice's mouth tightened. Lena closed the report. "I need access to the bearing boxes and the Eastern Expansion Assembly. The town can open them. The town says the last person who serviced them was Adam Fenwick." Beatrice glanced toward Clove. Clove's right ear tipped outward. "No," Beatrice said. Lena frowned. "No?" "I know that expression." "What expression?" "The one that ends with my dog stealing property." At the Lantern Spoon, Floyd was already making the request. Adam sat at the counter with a bowl of beef stew he had not ordered and did not intend to pay for, though Floyd would charge him anyway. "The state inspector needs someone who knows the old housing," Floyd said. "There are manuals." The manuals were stored in the Public Works basement. Good. The basement flooded. Adam ate another spoonful. Floyd lowered his voice. "You rebuilt the east bearing cover 12 years ago. I replaced 2 seized pins, which means you know how it opens. It opens with tools. Tools you own." Adam looked around the diner. The lunch crowd had thinned. Near the window, 2 factory workers were discussing the bridge. A woman in blue medical scrubs scraped ice from her boots before heading toward the north path. The bridge was not essential to everyone. That was part of the problem. People who drove heated trucks could call it an old walkway. People who depended on it called it Tuesday. "I am not joining a town argument," Adam said. Floyd rested the coffee pot against his hip. "No one asked you to join. They asked you to open a box." "That is how town arguments begin." Floyd's expression changed. Not anger, disappointment. It was the first time Adam had seen him stop trying to make the request harmless. "Beatrice's insurer sent her a warning," Floyd said. "If the bridge is officially labeled dangerous, they may exclude the eastern approach from her coverage." Adam's spoon stopped. "She does not own the bridge." "She owns the ground beneath the path." "That is not the same thing." "No," Floyd said, "but it may be expensive to prove." Adam pushed the bowl away. "I fix machines. I do not untangle deeds. You know what a failed bearing sounds like." So does any competent inspector. Lena Orton is competent. She is asking for access. Adam stood. No. He left enough cash beneath the bowl and walked back through the snow. Clove was waiting inside his shop. She had not taken a glove. That was new. She sat near the workbench, alert but still. Beatrice stood just inside the side door, one hand pressed around the other. Adam looked from the woman to the dog. "You brought her this time." "She brought me." Beatrice's voice lacked its usual edge. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then Beatrice placed Carson's report on the bench. "I do not need you to save the bridge," she said. "I do not need you to save the shop. I need to know whether a piece of machinery is making a noise because it is failing or because someone tightened the wrong part." Adam did not touch the report. "That is Lena's job. She cannot open the housing without damaging bolts you installed." "I can show her how." "Good. I did not say I would." Clove rose. She walked to the shelf where Adam had placed his gloves beyond her reach. Instead of jumping, she sat beneath them and looked up. Beatrice watched her. Adam watched Beatrice's hands. The fingers were slightly swollen. There was a faint gray stain of ink along the side of her thumb. She flexed the hand once, then hid it beneath the other. Something in Adam shifted. Not sympathy exactly. Sympathy could be kept at a polite distance. Recognition was less convenient. He knew what it looked like when a person built routines around pain so no one would see the pain itself. Beatrice looked toward the bridge through the frosted rear window. "Every bridge begins to fail in small places," she said. "A pin, a seam, a line in a ledger, usually something everyone agrees belongs to someone else." There was no accusation in her voice. That made it harder to resist. Adam picked up the report and opened it. He did not read the conclusions first. He turned to the diagrams. The bearing assembly shown in the appendix was generic. The maintenance notes were incomplete. One photograph of the east housing had been taken from an angle that concealed the drain channel. He closed the report. "One day," he said. Beatrice's shoulders lowered almost imperceptibly. "I will open the bearing boxes. I will inspect the mechanical assemblies. I will tell Lena what I see." "Reasonable. I am not attending meetings." "Of course not." "I am not speaking to the council." "Unthinkable." "I am not getting involved in whatever this is." Beatrice nodded solemnly. "You will remain entirely untouched by events." Adam looked at her. A little of the old sharpness had returned. Clove stood beneath the glove shelf, tail moving slowly. Adam reached up and took down the cognac leather pair. He tucked them into his coat pocket before Clove could claim either one. She followed him to the door anyway. Outside, the late afternoon sun had turned the snow pale gold. Beyond the river path, Alder Bridge stood between its two banks, carrying one person at a time across the cold. Adam locked the shop. "One day," he repeated. Neither Beatrice nor Clove argued. The three of them started toward the bridge. Snow fell lightly over Alder Bridge, too dry to cling at first. The flakes moved sideways across the river, catching briefly on the steel trusses before the wind carried them on. Beneath the bridge, dark water slipped between shelves of ice with a low, continuous murmur. Adam Fenwick stood at the eastern approach with his coat unzipped and a canvas tool bag resting against one boot. He had promised one day. He had already begun to regret giving it a number. Lena Orton set 2 orange safety cones across the narrow walkway and clipped a temporary inspection notice to the railing. Her cobalt jacket stood out against the snow. A mechanical pencil was tucked behind one ear, and her white hard hat carried a thin blue reflective stripe. "You look disappointed," she said. "I was hoping the bridge would repair itself overnight." Structures rarely respond well to passive encouragement. Adam looked toward the eastern-bearing housing. People do? No. Good, we agree on something. Clove waited with Beatrice several yards back from the restricted area. The dog wore her moss-green canvas coat against the cold. Her right ear tipped outward as she watched Adam kneel beside the metal cover. Beatrice stood in a wine-colored winter coat, one gloved hand resting on Clove's collar. She had insisted on coming, but had accepted Lena's order to remain off the bridge during the mechanical inspection. Accepted was perhaps too generous a word. She had obeyed while making her displeasure visible. Adam brushed snow from the housing and examined the bolts. "These are not the originals," he said. Lena crouched beside him. "How can you tell?" "Different head profile, galvanized coating, wrong washer thickness." "Dangerous?" "Not by themselves." He placed a socket over the first bolt and applied pressure. It did not move. Adam adjusted his stance, then tried again. The metal gave with a sharp crack that made Beatrice inhale behind them. "Rust?" Lena asked. "Over-torqued." He removed the bolt and held it out. The threads were slightly deformed. Whoever replaced these used a powered impact wrench and kept going after the joint seated. Lena photographed it. What would that do? This housing protects the sliding assembly. The bridge needs room to expand and contract as the temperature changes. If the cover is distorted or the assembly is clamped too tightly, the movement transfers somewhere else. To the steel frame? To whatever is least able to refuse. Adam removed the remaining bolts. 2 came free reluctantly. The third had to be cut. When the cover finally lifted, a smell of cold grease and trapped water rose from the cavity. Lena shone a light inside. The sliding plate had shifted less than half an inch, but its polished surface showed a bright scrape where metal had been forced against metal. Adam touched the edge with one gloved finger. "There is your groan." The sound reported by the consultant? Probably part of it. Part? The bridge still has age on it. Noise is not a diagnosis. Lena nodded once. That was what Adam liked about her. She did not ask him to turn an observation into a conclusion simply because a conclusion would be convenient. He moved toward the drainage channel below the eastern abutment. The narrow trench should have carried meltwater away from the bearing seat. Instead, frozen gravel and gray drilling residue filled the lower section. Ice had formed around one of the steel base plates in thick, opaque layers. Adam struck it gently with the wooden handle of a hammer. The ice answered with a dull note. "This was open when I serviced the housing," he said. "When?" 12 winters ago. A great deal can happen in 12 winters. This material did not arrive with the weather. Lena scraped at the frozen surface and exposed a pale, powdery mixture beneath. "Bentonite," she said, "likely from soil boring." "The survey crew?" "Possibly." Adam looked uphill toward the Wynn property, where red and yellow marking flags protruded from the snow. Someone had tested the ground near the proposed lodge access. "If they washed drilling slurry downhill," Adam said, "it could have settled here." "Carelessness is not sabotage." "I did not call it sabotage." "You were thinking the word." "I was thinking several words. Most are unsuitable for inspection reports." Lena almost smiled. They spent the next 2 hours examining the mechanical assemblies. Adam documented parts that had been replaced, parts that should have been replaced, and components that could not be properly assessed without lifting equipment. He never said the bridge was safe. He never said it was failing. Every time Beatrice asked for a simple answer, Lena gave her an accurate one instead. By late morning, Beatrice's patience had become visibly thin. "Can people continue crossing it?" she called from beyond the cones. "With the current pedestrian limits, there is no immediate evidence requiring emergency closure," Lena replied. Beatrice folded her arms. That sounded suspiciously like an answer assembled by committee. It means I will not frighten people without cause. And the second half? I will not reassure them without evidence. Clove looked from one woman to the other, then sat down heavily in the snow. Adam lowered the bearing cover into place without fully tightening it. The bridge shifted under a gust of wind. A long metallic groan rolled through the truss. Beatrice stiffened. This time, Adam heard the sound differently. Not as the cry of a structure about to collapse, but as stored pressure moving through parts that had been denied their proper play. A machine could protest because it was weak. It could also protest because someone had made flexibility impossible. By noon, Lena had called Miles Calder. He arrived that afternoon in a green parka that had faded unevenly at the shoulders. At 59, Miles was lean and slightly stooped, with a narrow face, a short silver goatee, and round glasses repaired at one hinge with a loop of fine wire. A red laser measure hung from his neck. A waterproof notebook protruded from his bag, swollen with old diagrams. He greeted Lena, glanced at Adam, and immediately looked past both of them toward the bridge. "Which sound?" he asked. "No greeting?" Lena said. "Good afternoon. Which sound?" Adam pointed to the Eastern Assembly. Miles listened while Adam explained the over-tightened housing, the scored sliding plate, and the blocked drainage route. He asked no unnecessary questions and several irritatingly precise ones. "How certain are you that the bolt deformation occurred during installation?" "High. High is not a percentage." 85. Better. Adam decided he disliked him in a professional way. Miles walked the bridge slowly, tapping selected points with a small phenolic hammer. He measured deflection, inspected the north chord, photographed rust scale, and muttered numbers into his notebook. Clove followed from the riverbank, pacing whenever Miles disappeared behind a truss. At one point, he stopped beneath the northern span and stared upward. "How long has that plate been flaking?" he asked. Lena consulted the municipal photographs. "Visible in the 2018 review. Less extensive." "Surface loss is real," Miles said. "Not catastrophic today, not something to admire for another 5 years." Beatrice heard him from the approach. So the report was right. Miles turned. "Reports are rarely right or wrong in the moral sense. They are supported, unsupported, or shaped by assumptions. That one appears shaped like a weapon." "Perhaps, but the steel does not care why someone measured it." He returned to his notes. The distinction irritated Beatrice, but Adam understood it. Carson's motives could be questioned. The corrosion could not. They reconvened that evening at Wynn Letterpress. The presses stood silent while snow gathered along the lower edges of the tall windows. Floyd arrived with 2 pots of stew, a basket of bread, and enough bowls to suggest he did not trust any serious discussion that lacked soup. Carson came because Lena had requested clarification from the party who commissioned the report. He removed his camel coat and laid a blue-black leather portfolio on the long table. His expression remained composed when Miles placed the questionable photograph beside an image of Alder Bridge's actual lower chord. "The rivet layout is different," Miles said. "This appendix photograph is not from Alder." Carson studied it. "I did not assemble the report." "No one said you did," Lena replied. "The consultant works for the lender." "Did you read the complete report before presenting it to Miss Wynn?" "Yes." "Did you notice that several conclusions were based on a worst-case maintenance assumption?" Carson's jaw tightened slightly. "I noticed the lender considered the bridge a liability." "That was not my question." "No," he said. "I am not an engineer." Adam leaned against the type cabinet, arms folded. Carson looked toward him. "Neither are you." "Correct." The answer seemed to deprive Carson of an argument he had expected. Miles turned several pages. The report assumes no meaningful maintenance after 2018. Mr. Fenwick's work records show replacement of 2 guide components in 2021. Carson looked at Adam. You kept records? I work for a living. Floyd made a sound into his bowl that may have been a cough. Lena continued. The report also recommends complete closure until major reconstruction. That is the most conservative option, but it is not the only defensible one. Carson closed the portfolio. My responsibility is to the project, the investors, and the workers I have already contracted. The bank will not finance a property with uncontrolled public access across a disputed structure. Then say that, Beatrice said. The room went still. She stood beside the small press, glasses low on her nose, one hand curled around the edge of the composing table. Do not tell me the bridge must close because Steele has spoken from the mountain, she continued. Say the bank dislikes uncertainty. Say you need control of the approach. Say my refusal costs you money. Carson held her gaze. All of those things are true. And you used the report anyway. Yes. The word came without apology. That honesty was colder than denial. Carson did not claim innocence. He claimed practicality. The bridge has genuine defects, he said. Your insurance carrier has genuine concerns. The town has avoided responsibility for years. I did not create any of that. No, Adam said. You just found the loose parts and leaned on them. Carson looked at him. That is one interpretation. It is the mechanical one. For the first time, Carson's composure thinned. He straightened the cuff of his shirt, though it was already perfectly aligned. Lena ended the exchange before it became useless. We need the municipal notices, maintenance resolutions, and access correspondence from the last 8 years. Beatrice turned toward the cabinets along the back wall. I have copies. Why? Carson asked. Because printers have always known that people become careless when they assume paper is temporary. The next hour changed the nature of the problem. The group spread letters and town notices across the composing tables. None announced a plan to close Alder Bridge. Instead, the language arrived in pieces. A temporary winter safety adjustment shifted inspection duties. A maintenance responsibility review removed a small budget line from Public Works. A seasonal access management measure allowed physical restrictions near the eastern approach. A letter from the insurer referred to landholder exposure arising from permissive public use. Each phrase sounded minor. Together they created a path toward closure without requiring anyone to stand before the town and say that closure was the goal. Beatrice ran one finger beneath a sentence. Polite words, she said, are often the ones with the sharpest teeth. Floyd had been unusually quiet. He stood at the end of the table reading a list of affected routes. His diner had supported Carson's preliminary development proposal. Floyd had told customers the lodge might bring enough winter business to keep Main Street alive. Now he found the name of his evening cook beside an employee transportation survey. 4 miles of additional walking if the bridge closed. No shoulder on the northern road. No bus service after 6. He set down the page. I treated this like parking, he said. No one answered. I thought the argument was about tourists, property values, and whether Beatrice would sell. I never asked who crossed the thing after dark. His voice carried none of its usual humor. The confession shifted the room more than Carson's admission had. Carson defended his interests because they were his. Floyd had failed to see people whose interests were quieter. He took out a small order pad. Give me names, he said. Beatrice looked up. For what? People who use the bridge, not estimates. People. Over the next several days, Floyd began collecting their accounts. Maribel Santos, the pharmacy technician, crossed at 6:30 every morning because she shared one car with her husband. A hotel cook named Vincent Lowe used the bridge after the final bus stopped running. Evelyn Marsh, who worked nights at the clinic, said the highway route forced her to walk beside snowplows. A baker, a packing house supervisor, and a man caring for his wife after a stroke all described the bridge not as picturesque, historic, or charming. They described it as how they got home. At the print shop, the meetings grew longer. Adam disliked the drift from mechanical facts into moral argument. At one point, he pushed away from the table. "My part is finished, the housing is over-tightened, the drainage is blocked. Miles has the structural data." Clove rose from beside the radiator and lay across the doorway. Adam stopped. "I can step over you." Clove rested her chin on her paws. Beatrice, pale from fatigue, pressed one hand beneath the table to hide its trembling. Adam saw it anyway. He also saw the stack of statements Floyd had gathered and the marked-up notices Lena had arranged in chronological order. Nothing in the room was hidden now. That was precisely why leaving felt different. Miles removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "The north cord has measurable section loss," he said. "The bridge needs staged reinforcement, not someday, within a practical near-term window." "How near?" Floyd asked. "Temporary stabilization before next winter. Full work after design and funding." "And until then?" Beatrice said. "Pedestrian use can continue under posted limits and scheduled monitoring, assuming the drainage issue is corrected and the Eastern Assembly is restored." Relief moved through the room, but Miles raised one hand. "This is not a victory." The relief stopped. Keeping it open requires an owner willing to own the risk, a maintenance plan, inspection intervals, funding, and insurance. Proving Mr. Penn's report was overstated does not make those obligations disappear. Adam looked at the papers covering the tables. For days, everyone had acted as though the central question was whether Carson could force the bridge closed. Miles had just exposed the harder truth. Even if Carson vanished, the bridge would still be old, the steel would still need work, the records would still be incomplete, and the town would still have to decide whether a path used by ordinary people was worth the inconvenience of taking responsibility for it. Outside, snow settled over Alder Bridge. The span remained open, carrying footsteps across the river one careful person at a time. Inside the print shop, no one celebrated. They had found the difference between danger and exaggeration. Now they had to decide what to do with the truth. Adam arrived before sunrise because machines were easier to understand before people began explaining them. Wynn letterpress stood dark at the end of the river path, its tall windows reflecting the faint blue of snow. The sign above the door was barely visible, but a thin line of light showed beneath the frame. He tried the handle. Unlocked. Inside, the print shop had none of its usual iron rhythm. No rollers turning, no paper snapping cleanly from a platen, no small metallic clicks from Beatrice sorting type. The presses stood beneath their hanging lamps like black animals asleep on their feet. Clove lifted her head from a rug near the radiator. She did not rise to greet him. That was the first thing Adam noticed. The second was Beatrice. She sat at the long composing table in her navy apron and burgundy vest, but she was not working. Her silver-white hair had not been clipped neatly to one side. It fell across her cheek in a way Adam had never seen. On the table lay 3 separate truths: a surgical appointment notice, an unsigned purchase agreement from Carson Penn, and a handwritten list of overdue bills. Beatrice covered the papers with one hand. It was a useless gesture. Adam had already seen them. "You are early," she said. "You said the small press motor was slipping." It was. Was? "It appears to have reconsidered." Machines did not reconsider. Adam set down his tool bag. The platen press near the back wall was smaller than the others, built for cards, notices, and short runs. Its flywheel had been disconnected. The drive belt hung loose. A wooden pedal had split near the hinge. Adam crossed to it and pressed the pedal with one boot. The linkage resisted halfway down. Bearing? Possibly. Or the shaft is misaligned. Then I'm relieved you have brought all the optimism. Her voice had its familiar blade, but not its force. Adam knelt beside the machine. Behind him, paper shifted. Beatrice gathered the documents into a stack. He did not turn around. When is the surgery? The room became still. Clove's ears moved toward Beatrice. That is not part of the repair. No? Then it is none of your business. Adam loosened the lower access panel. You left it on the table. I also left a ruler. Shall we discuss its private life? He removed the cover. Grease had thickened around the pedal shaft. One bushing was worn nearly oval. You have been forcing it. I have been operating it. Those are not always the same thing. Beatrice said nothing. Adam examined the cracked pedal. The brake had been bound with wire and adhesive, then wrapped in black tape. A temporary repair made permanent by repetition. He knew the type. He had built years out of them. The first time Ruth had needed help getting from the bed to the bathroom, Adam had told himself it was temporary. The first oxygen delivery had been temporary. So had the rail he installed beside the stairs, the medicine cabinet arranged by hour, and the chair he placed in the shower. Temporary things had slowly become the architecture of their marriage. He had never admitted when the structure changed. Behind him, Beatrice moved the stack of papers into a drawer. Adam sat back on his heels. You were considering selling before Carson arrived. It was not a question. Beatrice looked toward the dark windows. Yes? Clove rose and crossed the room. She rested her chin on Beatrice's knee. Beatrice's fingers moved into the fur beneath the dog's ear. I had the building appraised last summer, she said, before his lodge, before the bridge report, before everyone decided I had become a symbol. You do not enjoy being a symbol? Symbols do not pay heating bills. Adam looked at the presses. The largest one had been cast before the Second World War. Its frame was polished by decades of hands. The rollers were clean. The oil cups were filled. Every surface had been maintained with discipline, not neglect, preparation. You were going to close. I was going to consider closing. You had an appraisal. Considering responsibly requires numbers. And the surgery? Beatrice's jaw tightened. March. Adam waited. She looked at him sharply. You need not use silence as a crowbar. I did not ask anything. That is how you make it worse. He turned back to the machine and removed the worn bushing. Beatrice stared at the dark body of the press. My hands wake me at night, she said. Some mornings I cannot close the right one until noon. The doctor says surgery should help, but help is a word physicians use when they wish to avoid promises. Adam placed the damaged part on a cloth. And the shop? The shop has survived 4 owners, 2 floods, 1 fire, and a century of people predicting paper was finished. That was not what I asked. No, her voice softened. It was not. Clove pressed more firmly against her leg. Beatrice looked down at the dog. After Laurel died, I told myself I would keep everything going exactly as she left it. Adam had heard Laurel's name before, but only in pieces. The former owner of Clove, Beatrice's younger sister, someone represented by a few photographs near the back office and by the dog who seemed unwilling to allow closed doors. She worked here? He asked, on days when she could be persuaded to remain indoors. There was the faintest smile. Laurel designed posters, wedding invitations, terrible poetry broadsides no one bought. She believed every empty wall was asking for color. Beatrice reached for a small framed print on the shelf beside her. It showed a woman in a yellow coat standing on Alder Bridge, one hand raised against the snow. At her side was a younger Clove, both ears too large for her head. Laurel thought Clove should have useful work, Beatrice said. Not obedience trials, not tricks for strangers. Family work. Adam looked at her. When someone stormed out after an argument, Laurel gave Clove a glove, a scarf, whatever carried the person's scent. Then she told her to find the other fool. The other fool? That was the command. Adam almost smiled. Beatrice continued. Clove would carry the object across the house, or across town if necessary. Laurel said people were more willing to follow a dog than admit they wanted to return. Clove's tail moved once against the floor. She kept doing it after Laurel died, Beatrice said. At first with my things, then Floyd's, now yours. So she is not stealing. Oh, she is absolutely stealing. She simply has a philosophy. Adam looked toward the dog. Clove met his eyes without shame. The story should have made the behavior seem smaller. Instead, it changed the weight of every glove she had taken. Adam had thought Clove was pulling him toward a building. She had been pulling him toward people. Beatrice stood too quickly. Pain crossed her face before she could hide it. One hand caught the edge of the table. Adam rose. I am fine. You nearly fell. I changed position. Poorly? She gave him a furious look, but the anger did not hold. Clove stepped between them, not alarmed, simply present. Adam moved a chair closer. Beatrice ignored it for several seconds, then sat. He returned to the press. I can replace the bushing, he said. That will repair the pedal. No, it will repair one part of the pedal. An important distinction? Yes. He removed the linkage arm and measured the available travel. The machine required too much force at the beginning of the stroke. For a healthy operator, it was inconvenient. For Beatrice, it was a repeated punishment. Adam took out his steel ruler. I can extend the lever arm. Beatrice watched him. To do what? Reduce the force. The pedal will travel farther. Yes. That slows the cycle. Yes. I dislike it already. You dislike most things before they help. That is experience, not pessimism. He sketched a modified linkage on the back of an old invoice, a longer arm, a different pivot point, a return spring with less resistance. The machine would never run as fast, but it would require far less pressure from the operator's foot and less grip strength at the release handle. A good machine, Adam said, should share the load with the person using it. Beatrice looked at him for a long moment. You are talking about the press? Of course. Convenient. Adam put the pencil down. He had not planned to say anything else, but the silent presses, the surgical paper, and Clove's story had rearranged the room. There were moments when truth became harder to avoid than confession. When Ruth got sick, he said, people offered to help. Beatrice did not move. Floyd, neighbors, her sister in Vermont. I told them we had a system. Did you? Yes. That was not the question I intended. Adam looked at the drawing. I believed if I did everything correctly, nothing else would be taken from us. The words came slowly, without drama. He had no talent for dramatic confession and no desire to acquire one. I timed the medicine. I tracked every symptom. I checked the equipment twice. Then 3 times. I stopped letting people visit because visits tired her. I stopped accepting food because I could cook. I stopped sleeping because no one else knew what to listen for. Beatrice's expression changed, but she did not interrupt. By the end, Adam said, the house was quiet enough for her to rest. He looked toward the dark windows. It was also quiet enough that we were alone. Clove left Beatrice and came to him. She sat beside his knee. Adam rested one hand briefly on the top of her head. The gesture surprised all three of them. Beatrice looked away first. "I am sorry," she said. "I am not telling you, so you will be." "Then why tell me?" Adam considered the press. "Because you are building the same kind of system." Beatrice's face closed. "The shop is not your wife." "No." "And I am not you." "No." "Then do not confuse recognition with authority." Adam accepted the blow. It was accurate. He packed the damaged bushing and linkage into his tool bag. "I will make the parts at my shop." "I did not agree." "You called me." "For a motor." "The motor is fine." Beatrice glanced toward the disconnected flywheel. "How disappointing." Adam stood. "I will not save your shop." "I should hope not. You have barely survived my pedal." "I will modify one press." She studied him. "Why?" "Because it should not require more strength than the work needs." That answer she could accept. The rest would have sounded too much like care. By 10, Floyd arrived with Marion Vale. Marion was 61, dressed in a plum turtleneck beneath a long charcoal cardigan. Her salt and pepper curls were cut close at the neck, and square red glasses framed eyes that seemed capable of finding weak clauses before anyone else noticed there was a sentence. She placed a brick-red canvas document bag on the table. "I was promised coffee," she said. Floyd held up a metal pot. "And civic confusion." "That was assumed." Lena joined them soon after, carrying a folder of inspection notes. The question before them was no longer whether the bridge needed work. Miles had settled that. The question was who could legally maintain it. "A community trust is possible," Lena said, "or a nonprofit stewardship agreement." "Possible is not immediate," Marion replied. She pulled several color-coded tabs from her bag. "You need articles of incorporation, a board, insurance, a maintenance agreement, and a source of funds that exists outside the word volunteer." Floyd frowned. "How long?" "To create something real? Months." "We have days before the hearing." "Then in days you create evidence that months would not be wasted." Beatrice leaned back in her chair. "Meaning?" "Commitments, founding members, preliminary budgets, letters from businesses, a licensed engineer willing to remain involved, a request for a temporary transition period." "You can prepare that?" Floyd asked. "I can prepare a legal skeleton. You must prove there is a body willing to stand inside it." Clove lay beneath the table, her head resting across Marion's boots as if approving the metaphor. That afternoon, Tessa Muir arrived from the town library with a portable scanner under one arm and a box of archival sleeves under the other. At 44, Tessa moved quickly without appearing hurried. Her reddish-brown hair was cut in a long pixie style, and freckles crossed the bridge of her nose. A mustard-yellow parka made her look like a bright punctuation mark in the gray room. She stopped inside the door. For several seconds, she simply stared at the presses. "I studied print design," she said. Beatrice raised one eyebrow. "And recovered?" "I changed careers?" "Ah, a partial recovery." Tessa smiled. She had come to digitize easement records, maintenance letters, and Old Town notices before they were lost or damaged. Within an hour, she had created a filing system, assigned numbers to each box, and found 2 duplicate documents that everyone else had treated as separate records. She also walked around the small press Adam had begun dismantling. "Who uses this after your surgery?" she asked Beatrice. The question landed harder than expected. Beatrice looked toward the typed drawers. "No one has been appointed." "Then perhaps appointment is the wrong model." Tessa ran one finger along the edge of the composing table. "This place does not need one replacement, Beatrice. It needs several people who know different parts." Beatrice's mouth tightened. The idea was both insult and relief. Adam saw both pass across her face. By late afternoon, the shop was no longer quiet. Marion dictated a list of legal requirements. Lena marked inspection intervals. Tessa scanned deeds and created digital folders. Floyd argued that cinnamon rolls constituted meeting infrastructure. Adam worked at the small press, measuring the new linkage. Beatrice remained at the center of the room, but for the first time, she was not operating every part of it. She corrected Tessa's labeling system. She challenged Marion's wording. She told Floyd to move the coffee away from the type cases. Then, after a long hesitation, she handed Tessa the key to the archive cabinet. It was a small action. No one commented. That was why it mattered. Clove rose from beneath the table, walked to Beatrice, and rested her head against the woman's thigh. Beatrice placed one stiff hand between the dog's ears. Adam looked around the room. The bridge needed an owner. The press needed a lighter mechanism. The records needed more than one keeper. And the people inside Wynn Letterpress had all spent years confusing usefulness with carrying everything alone. Outside, snow brightened the windows. Inside, the old machines remained silent, but the room no longer felt abandoned. It sounded like work beginning. The first clean impression came out crooked. Beatrice held the sheet at arm's length beneath the hanging lamp and examined the black border with the severity of a judge reviewing a confession. The lower corner is drifting. Tessa Muir leaned over her shoulder. By less than 1/8 of an inch. Then it is drifting with confidence. Across the room, Adam Fenwick removed the side panel from the small platen press and adjusted the new linkage by half a turn. The modification had taken 3 evenings. He had replaced the worn bushing, extended the pedal arm, added a lighter return spring, and moved the pivot point so the press required less force at the beginning of each cycle. The pedal now traveled farther, as he had warned, and the machine ran more slowly. Beatrice had described this as the mechanical equivalent of aging. Adam had described it as functional. Now Tessa pressed the pedal again. The platen closed with a measured iron kiss. When it opened, she lifted the next sheet. The border sat square. Beatrice inspected it. "Well," she said at last, "the machine has become tolerable." Adam tightened the panel. "High praise. Do not become dependent on it." Wynn Letterpress had changed in less than a week. The lamps burned before sunrise and after dark. Folding tables filled the space between the old presses. Boxes of municipal records stood beside reams of cream paper. Extension cords ran toward scanners and laptop computers that looked strangely delicate among the cast-iron machinery. Tessa had created a volunteer schedule and pinned it beside the door. No one under 18 was involved. The work required careful handling of lead type, heavy paper, hot equipment, and documents containing private information. The people who came were adults from across Briar Glen: shopkeepers, mill workers, retirees, nurses, mechanics, cooks, and several residents from the north side of the river. They arrived with different reasons. Some wanted to protect the bridge. Some wanted to prevent Carson Penn's lodge from controlling access. Some believed the lodge might help the town, but thought the bridge should remain public. A few admitted they did not yet know what they believed, and had come because Floyd Red had promised cinnamon rolls. Tessa divided them into teams. One group scanned maintenance records. Another sorted easement documents by date. A third learned to set type under Beatrice's supervision. Beatrice no longer lifted the heavy forms or pulled the stiffest levers. She sat at the composing table in her navy apron, red hair clipped bright against her silver bob, and corrected everyone with impartial cruelty. "That letter is upside down." "It looks correct to me," a retired bookkeeper said. "That is because type is set backward." "Then perhaps it is the alphabet that has made a poor decision." Beatrice looked at her. "Keep her," she told Tessa. The room laughed. It was not the laughter of rescue. No one treated Beatrice as fragile, and she did not behave as though gratitude required sweetness. She taught kerning, spacing, ink pressure, and the discipline of reading every line twice. Her hands still hurt. But the room no longer stopped when they did. At the far end of the shop, Lena Orton and Miles Calder had covered one wall with drawings of Alder Bridge. The original engineering report was too dense for most residents to interpret. Its diagrams showed stress concentrations, section loss, and load assumptions without explaining what those things meant to someone who simply needed to cross the river after work. Lena redrew the eastern bearing assembly as 3 simple layers. Miles created a color-coded section of the north chord showing where metal loss had occurred and how staged reinforcement could address it. "No red," Beatrice called from across the shop. Miles looked up from his marker. "Why?" "Red means catastrophe. It also means corrosion. To you, to everyone else, it means the bridge is about to fall into the river." Miles considered this. He replaced the red with dark orange. "Engineering compromised by typography," he muttered. "Civilization advances," Beatrice replied. Marion Vale occupied the long table near the front windows. Her red-framed glasses sat low on her nose as she worked through the preliminary documents for the proposed Alder Crossing Trust. Colored tabs divided the stack into governance, insurance, funding, maintenance, and public access. The name had been Floyd's suggestion. Beatrice had called it sentimental. Marion had called it legally available. That settled the matter. The trust did not yet exist. Marion repeated this whenever enthusiasm threatened to outrun reality. They had draft articles, proposed board positions, a preliminary budget, and a list of conditions that would have to be met before any transfer of responsibility could occur. What they did not have was time. The public hearing was less than a week away. Their goal was not to present a finished institution. It was to prove that the institution could become real if the town granted a 90-day transition period. Floyd stood near the entrance with a clipboard, collecting commitments. He had learned to ask precise questions. Not, "Will you support the bridge?" but, "Can your business donate lumber? Can you provide 4 hours of bookkeeping each month? Can you contribute to the first insurance premium? Will you sign a letter stating how often your employees use the crossing?" Good intentions were warm. Marion required numbers. By Thursday, the shop had produced 3 documents. The first explained the bridge's actual condition. It stated clearly that the north chord had measurable corrosion, the eastern sliding assembly required correction, and the drainage channel needed immediate clearing. The second outlined staged repairs, short-term stabilization, scheduled inspections, load restrictions, and a longer-term reinforcement design. The third presented the proposed community stewardship model, including funding sources, professional oversight, and permanent public access. Beatrice read all 3 twice. Then she placed her palm on the first page. "You left out the insurance estimate." Floyd shifted his weight. "It is discouraging. It is a cost. It may frighten people away." Then they should be frightened honestly. Tessa looked toward Marion. Marion nodded. "She is right." Floyd exhaled. Beatrice continued. "Add the temporary limits, add the corrosion, add the fact that volunteer labor cannot replace licensed work." "We are trying to build support," Floyd said. "We are trying to build something that survives support." The sentence silenced the room. Adam stood near the press with a stack of trimmed paper in his hands. He watched several volunteers glance toward the door. This was the moment when campaigns usually chose comfort over truth. He had seen it in repair estimates, town budgets, even hospital conversations. People wanted the number that allowed them to keep believing nothing fundamental had changed. Beatrice refused to give it to them. Tessa added the insurance estimate. Miles added a sentence explaining that the bridge could remain open only under scheduled monitoring. The final version was less inspiring. It was also credible. That afternoon, Adam began delivering copies. He took Clove because she had stationed herself beside the outgoing boxes and refused to move when he tried to lift them. "You are not carrying paper," he told her. Clove wore her moss-green coat and maple leaf tag. She looked toward his gloves. Adam put them in his coat pocket. "Those are not part of the route." Her right ear tipped outward. They started along Main Street. The first stop was a plumbing supply shop. The owner read the repair summary, frowned at the insurance figure, and asked whether the bridge would still carry snow removal equipment. "I do not know," Adam said. The answer surprised both of them. The man looked up. "You worked on it." "I worked on the mechanical assembly. Miles would need to answer the equipment load question." "So you are not saying it is safe?" "I am saying the things I know. The rest is on the page." The owner read again. "I can donate galvanized fasteners if the specification allows." Adam wrote it down. At the pharmacy, Maribel Santos signed a statement about her winter route. At a carpentry shop, two brothers argued over whether the trust would become another organization asking businesses for money. Adam did not try to charm them. He explained how the bearing assembly worked. Clove leaned against the more skeptical brother until the man absently scratched behind her tilted ear. By the end of the conversation, they had not agreed to donate. They had agreed to attend the hearing. Adam considered that useful. At one house north of the river, a retired mill worker named Walter Ames opened the door wearing suspenders over a thermal shirt. He listened to Adam's explanation and shook his head. "The town owned that bridge when I worked at the mill. The records are less clear. The records are wrong. They may be incomplete." That is a polite way to say wrong. Adam handed him the public access proposal. Walter glanced down. "You people want volunteers to maintain steel now?" "No. The proposal requires licensed inspection and contracted structural work." "Then why call it community?" "Because someone has to manage the money, protect access, and stop pretending the bridge belongs to whoever is looking away." Walter studied him. "You always talk this much?" "No." Clove chose that moment to push her nose beneath Walter's hand. The old man looked down. "She yours?" "No." Clove sat on Adam's boot. Walter raised an eyebrow. "It is under review," Adam said. Walter signed the statement. They were halfway back to the print shop when Clove slipped into an open repair garage and emerged carrying a gray wool glove. Adam stopped. A woman in coveralls stepped out after her. "That is mine." "I know." Clove held the glove by the cuff. Adam crouched. "Drop it." She turned her head. The woman folded her arms. "Strong leadership." Adam offered Clove a piece of dried liver from the pouch Tessa had given him. Clove surrendered the glove. Adam handed it back. "My apologies." The woman brushed off the fur. "She only steals from people she likes?" "That remains unproven." By the time they returned, the story had traveled faster than they had. Floyd stood outside the print shop, laughing so hard he had to hold the doorframe. "Not a word," Adam said. "I have several." "Use none." Inside, the volunteer teams had begun printing the first full run. The slow rhythm of the modified press filled the room. Step, close, release, open. Paper lifted, paper stacked. The machine no longer belonged entirely to Beatrice's hands. That seemed to pain her and free her in equal measure. She corrected the ink pressure, then stepped back while Tessa ran the next sheet. For several seconds, Beatrice watched someone else operate the press without intervention. Adam noticed. He said nothing. The following evening, Carson Penn waited outside Fenwick Mechanical. His black SUV idled near the curb, exhaust fading into the snow. He wore a dark parka rather than the camel coat, and the absence of polish made him look more tired. Clove entered the shop ahead of Adam and settled near the furnace. Carson followed, but remained by the door. "I read your materials," he said. "They are public." "You describe my consultant's report as incomplete." "It is." "You also acknowledge the bridge needs substantial work." "It does." Carson looked around the shop, the suspended chains, tool cabinets, and rebuilt motors. "My project is not a vanity lodge." Adam waited. "I have borrowed against 2 other properties. I have contracts with local suppliers. I have promised investors a controlled access point because the bank will not accept uncertainty around the eastern approach." "That sounds expensive." "It is." "Still not a public reason to close the bridge." Carson's expression tightened. "If the project collapses, my company may not survive. Neither will several of the contracts already awarded." "Then you made promises before you controlled the land." "I made commitments based on negotiations I believed would succeed." "Beatrice never agreed to sell." "She requested an appraisal." "That is not agreement." Carson adjusted one cuff beneath his coat sleeve. Adam remembered seeing the gesture at the print shop. It was how Carson restored order to himself when the conversation refused to cooperate. "You think I am taking something from the town," Carson said. "I think I am bringing jobs to a place, losing them." "The town may need jobs." "Then we agree." "It does not need them badly enough to make the people with the fewest choices walk 4 miles on an icy road." Carson looked toward Clove. The dog watched him without hostility. "The survey permit remains active until midnight before the hearing," he said. "The insurer is requiring a controlled safety zone around the eastern abutment." "How wide?" "That depends on field conditions." "Convenient." "It is legal." "That is not what I asked." For a moment, neither man spoke. Carson's voice lowered. "I am telling you because I would prefer the work happen without a public spectacle." "Then define the work publicly." "The permit is filed." "Most people do not read permits." "That is not my responsibility." Adam looked at him. There it was. Not cruelty, not conspiracy. The sentence beneath the entire dispute. "Not my responsibility." Carson seemed to hear it too. His gaze shifted away first. When he left, Adam stood alone near the open bay as snow moved through the beam of the exterior light. Clove came to his side. He rested one hand briefly against her shoulder. The next morning, Floyd asked to speak before the largest volunteer shift began. Nearly 30 adults stood among the presses and folding tables. Some held coffee. Others still wore work boots or medical scrubs. Floyd did not bring his usual jokes. He stood beside the ink rack with his clipboard hanging at his side. "I supported Penn's Lodge," he said. Several people shifted. "I signed the business letter last fall. I told people it would bring customers, jobs, and tax money." "All of that may still be true." He looked toward Vincent Lowe, the hotel cook who crossed the bridge after the buses stopped. "What I did not ask was who would pay for the access Carson needed." Floyd's silver mustache moved when he swallowed. "I thought the cost was land, maybe parking, maybe an argument between Beatrice and a developer." He shook his head. "The cost was going to be time, safety, and distance for people I serve coffee to every week." No one applauded. That made the moment honest. Floyd continued. "My diner is struggling. I wanted the lodge because I was afraid. I am still afraid, but I do not get to solve my fear by making someone else's winter harder." A woman near the scanner table raised her hand. "Are you against the lodge now?" Floyd considered. "I am against pretending the choice must be the lodge or the bridge." The room loosened, not united, but less divided. Marion stepped forward with the latest draft. "We are not asking the council to transfer the bridge next week," she said. "We are asking for 90 days to complete insurance, governance, funding, and maintenance agreements." "What if we fail?" someone asked. "Then the town will know exactly what is missing," Marion replied. "That is better than failing because no one tried to count." Floyd lifted the clipboard again. Commitments came slowly. A hardware store pledged materials within engineering specifications. A local accountant offered monthly bookkeeping. 2 businesses promised small contributions toward insurance. Several residents volunteered time for document management, snow clearing on the approaches, and fundraising, not structural work. Tessa recorded every promise. Beatrice rejected 2 that were too vague. Miles added conditions to 3. Lena reminded everyone that public access would remain subject to safety restrictions. By evening, the stack of commitments was thick enough to require a second folder, not enough to save the bridge, enough to prove that responsibility had begun to acquire names. The presses continued after dark. Black ink settled onto cream paper. Pages emerged one at a time, carrying difficult facts instead of slogans. Adam stood beside the modified press while Tessa worked the pedal. Clove slept beneath the delivery table with someone else's wool glove between her paws. Adam recognized it as Floyd's. He considered returning it. Then he looked across the shop. Floyd was explaining the insurance estimate to 3 restaurant owners. Beatrice was teaching a retired electrician how to Loctite into a chase. Marion was correcting the bylaws. Lena and Miles were arguing quietly over inspection intervals. For once, no one needed Adam to fix the whole room. He bent down, removed the glove gently from Clove's paws, and placed it on the table where Floyd would eventually find it. The legal documents remained unfinished. The hearing could still go badly. Carson's survey permit still carried its midnight deadline. But Wynn Letterpress had become something it had not been for years. Not a monument, not a battlefield. A place where a town could see the true weight of what it claimed to value and begin deciding who was willing to carry which part. By 6 in the evening, Briar Glen seemed to have borrowed light from another season. Paper lanterns hung from iron hooks along Main Street, glowing amber and gold against the snow. Their reflections trembled in the dark shop windows. The path of light began at the town square, past Lantern Spoon and Wynn Letterpress, then continued toward Alder Bridge in a loose procession of color. For one night, the cold looked decorative. Lantern Spoon had moved half its kitchen onto the sidewalk. Floyd Red stood behind 2 steaming soup kettles in his orange winter coat, issuing bowls, bread, and unsolicited opinions with equal efficiency. "Take the chowder," he told a man reaching for vegetable stew. "You have the face of someone who has made enough bad choices." Across the street, Tessa Muir managed a folding table beneath a canvas canopy. One side held festival programs. The other held commitment forms for Alder Crossing Trust. She had labeled the boxes carefully. Founding signatures. Volunteer hours. Business pledges. Questions requiring Marion. The last box was already the fullest. Wynn Letterpress remained open as a warming station. Beatrice sat near the small modified press in her wine-colored coat, instructing volunteers as they printed the final hearing packets. The press moved slowly but evenly beneath its redesigned linkage. Step, close, release, open. The rhythm joined the muffled music from the square. Adam Fenwick spent most of the evening beside a portable generator parked near the public heating tents. He wore his olive-drab combat shirt beneath a charcoal wool coat, the sleeves visible whenever he removed his gloves to work. The generator had developed an uneven idle just before sunset. Adam adjusted the fuel mixture, listened, then placed 2 fingers against the side panel to feel the vibration. Clove sat beside the toolbox in her moss-green coat. The German shepherd watched the festival without restlessness. Her amber eyes followed adults carrying lanterns along the snowy street. Her tilted right ear moved toward every burst of laughter, every dropped spoon, every door opening. Adam tightened the final screw. The engine settled into a clean hum. "That should hold," he said. Clove looked at his gloves. "They remain mine." She yawned. At the square, Carson Penn stood beneath a banner bearing the logo of his development company. He had agreed months earlier to sponsor part of the festival before the bridge dispute became public. His money had paid for lantern materials, temporary lighting, and the musicians now playing beside the frozen fountain. The sponsorship had become awkward. Some residents thanked him for it. Others passed his table without looking. Carson remained polite to both groups. He wore a black parka and dark gloves. His expression was controlled, but Adam noticed how often he checked his phone. The survey crew had been expected before dusk. They had not arrived. Near 7:30, Lena Orton crossed the square, carrying a waterproof folder beneath one arm. Miles Calder followed with his green parka unfastened and his round glasses fogged from the warmth of the town hall. "The hearing packets are complete?" Lena asked Tessa. "Printed, numbered, and digitally backed up." "Insurance documentation?" "Preliminary only." "Good." Tessa blinked. "Good?" "It means the packet is honest." Miles lifted a paper cup of cider. "The bridge diagrams have been simplified without becoming inaccurate." Beatrice called from the print shop doorway. "You may thank typography." "I thanked it by not using red." The festival continued. Adults gathered near the bridge to release small lanterns from wooden poles rather than into the sky. Their lights formed a line across the railing, turning the old steel span into a glowing path above the river. For a time, the bridge looked less like a disputed structure than what it had always been, a way across. The first truck arrived at 8:12. Its headlights appeared along the service road east of the print shop. A second vehicle followed, then a flatbed carrying concrete barriers, rolled mesh fencing, and metal posts. Clove stood. The muscles along her shoulders tightened beneath her coat. Adam heard the truck before he saw it. A diesel engine in low gear, followed by the scrape of a flatbed ramp. Carson looked down at his phone, then toward the bridge. The expression on his face changed only slightly, but enough. He had known the crew might come, perhaps not exactly when, perhaps exactly when. A broad man climbed down from the lead truck. Elias Boone was 58, heavy through the shoulders and chest, with a short salt and pepper beard and a yellow hard hat marked by years of scratches. His left leg moved with a slight stiffness when he crossed the packed snow. A red radio was clipped to his right shoulder. He unfolded a site plan against the truck hood and called his crew over. "Barriers stay inside the marked survey boundary," he said. "No one touches the bridge structure. We secure the eastern work zone, finish the boring setup, and leave the access corridor as shown." One worker pointed toward the narrow approach. "The corridor is only 4 feet. "That is what the drawing gives us." Elias looked toward the festival lights. He did not look pleased, but he had a permit, a work order, and a crew standing in freezing weather. They began unloading. The first metal post struck the ground with a hard clang. Clove flinched. The second sound came sharper, carried along the frozen riverbank. She moved away from Adam's toolbox and stared toward the eastern approach. "Stay," Adam said. Clove remained still for 3 seconds. Then another post hit the ground. She ran, not toward the bridge at first. She turned back to Adam's work table, rose on her hind legs, and took one cognac glove from beside the wrench set. "Clove." She looked at him with the glove held by the cuff. Then she sprinted toward the river path. Adam swore softly, grabbed his coat, and followed. Several adults near the heating tent laughed when they saw the familiar theft. Then Clove barked. The sound stopped them. She rarely barked in town. One short warning could mean a delivery truck backing too close or a stranger entering the print shop after hours. This was different. She barked twice, ran several yards, then looked back. Adam lengthened his stride. At the eastern approach, the crew had already positioned 2 mesh panels. The concrete barriers remained on the flatbed, but their proposed placement had been marked in orange paint across part of the walkway. Adam saw the problem immediately. The path left between the fence and snowbank was technically open. A person carrying groceries could not pass comfortably. 2 people could not cross in opposite directions. Anyone using a cane, cart, or mobility aid would struggle. More concerning was the line of painted marks near the drainage channel. Elias pointed to a location near the abutment. "First post here." Adam stepped closer. "No." Elias turned. He did not respond like a man eager for confrontation. He looked at Adam, then at the marked ground. "This is an active work area. That post goes through the drainage bed. We are outside the bridge structure. You are above the east runoff channel." Elias unfolded the plan. "Not according to this. The plan does not show the original drain. That is not my drawing. It will still be your post." The crew paused. Carson arrived behind them. "Adam," he said, "the permit allows the safety boundary. It does not make the ground forget what is underneath it." Carson looked toward Elias. "Continue inside the approved area." Elias did not move. "I need the inspector," he said. Carson's face tightened. "The permit has already been reviewed." "I said I need the inspector." It was the first clear break in momentum, not a victory. A professional refusing to turn uncertainty into damage. Clove had already left again. She ran back toward Wynn letterpress, still carrying Adam's glove. Her paws threw powder behind her. At the door, she scratched twice and barked until Beatrice appeared. "What have you stolen now?" Clove spun toward the bridge. Beatrice saw the trucks. Her expression hardened. "Floyd!" Floyd looked up from the soup kettles. Within moments, he was crossing the street, wiping his hands on a towel. Beatrice told him to find Lena. Tessa gathered the permit copies. Marion closed the commitment folder and placed it beneath her coat. Clove ran back toward Adam. Adults along the lantern route began to follow, not because they understood the problem, but because they recognized the dog's alarm and the movement of familiar people toward the bridge. By the time Lena reached the eastern approach, nearly 40 residents stood beyond the work boundary. The crowd made the scene dangerous in a new way. Lena raised her voice. "Everyone remain behind the marked festival line. Do not approach the equipment." The order worked because she gave it without panic. Miles went directly to Adam. "What is the issue?" "Post line crosses the old drain. Barrier placement narrows the corridor below practical public use." Miles studied the ground, then crouched beside the snowbank. Adam used a shovel to expose the edge of the stone drainage channel. The original culvert line appeared beneath the snow. Miles followed it toward the abutment. "If they drive the post here," he said, "they may fracture the capstone or redirect meltwater against the bearing seat." Carson stepped forward. "May?" "Yes," Miles said. "That word is why work pauses." Lena opened the permit. The authorization allowed soil testing and temporary protection around the boring site. It required preservation of the existing public access route, except during short, supervised equipment movements. "This fence layout does not preserve meaningful access," she said. Carson pointed to the plan. "It leaves a corridor. A corridor that cannot safely accommodate normal pedestrian use in winter." "The permit does not specify width." "No," Lena said. "The public easement documents do. Marion handed her a copy, 8 feet minimum. Carson read the line. The muscles in his jaw shifted. "The survey zone can be adjusted," he said. "Not with the concrete barriers where they are marked," Miles replied. Elias crossed his arms. "My crew does not place anything until the drawing is corrected." One of Carson's representatives approached him and spoke quietly. Carson listened. The festival continued behind them in fragments. Music from the square, the hiss of the soup burners, lantern paper rustling in the wind. He could insist on the narrowest interpretation of the permit. He could force Lena to issue a formal stop order. He could create a legal dispute before the morning hearing and claim his crew had been obstructed. For several seconds, Carson looked toward the residents gathered beyond the line. They were not shouting. That seemed to affect him more than anger might have. Vincent Lowe stood in his hotel coat after finishing a shift. Evelyn Marsh wore clinic scrubs beneath a parka. Walter Ames leaned on a cane near the back. These were not activists Carson could dismiss as opponents to development. They were the people the corridor was supposedly still open for. Carson turned to Elias. "Move the fencing outside the easement width. Leave the barriers on the truck. No posts until the drainage line is surveyed." Elias nodded once. The representative beside Carson began to object. Carson cut him off. "We are not closing the bridge tonight." No one applauded. Carson did not deserve applause, and he did not ask for it. He had not surrendered the project or admitted wrongdoing. He had simply refused to turn an ambiguous permit into an irreversible act under festival lights. The crew began lifting the mesh panels away from the walkway. Then the wind arrived. It came down the river in a sudden hard gust, bending the lantern poles and sending powder snow across the bridge. Several paper lanterns collapsed inward. Others went dark at once. The musicians stopped playing. A second gust tore loose one of the canvas awnings near the square. Floyd shouted for people to move indoors. Wynn letterpress became the nearest warm shelter. Adults entered carrying dead lanterns, bowls of soup, folders, hats, and folding signs. The print shop filled until there was barely room between the presses. Beatrice stood beside the small platen machine and took control before the crowd could become disorder. "Lanterns away from the paper," she called. "Wet coats on the hooks. Coffee nowhere near the type." Floyd arrived with a soup kettle. "Where?" "Not near anything built before you were born." "That eliminates most of the room." "Then hold it." Tessa reopened the commitment table against the back wall. Marion set out the founding forms. Lena placed the permit dispute notes beside the hearing packets. The disruption did what no scheduled meeting had managed. It put the entire argument into one room. People who supported the lodge stood beside people who opposed it. Business owners spoke with night workers. Residents from both sides of the river studied the repair diagrams, while Miles explained why the bridge needed real work even if it did not need closure. Marion did not make speeches. She read names. 3 founding directors still required. Hands rose. 2 businesses willing to provide documented cash commitments rather than estimated materials. Floyd named Lantern Spoon first. A hardware supplier followed. Administrative volunteers for the 90-day formation period. Tessa began recording names. Beatrice directed a fresh print run of the final hearing summary. She did not operate the pedal herself. She stood beside a retired bookkeeper and corrected the paper alignment. Adam watched from near the door. His glove was still in Clove's mouth. She had returned it to no one. He crouched. "You have made your point." Clove placed it in his hand. The leather was damp with snow. Behind them, the press began its slow rhythm. Step, close, release, open. A sheet appeared bearing the words, "Alder crossing a public path, a shared responsibility." Adam had once believed a machine could be understood by finding the failed part. The wrong bolt? The worn bearing? The cracked pedal? A town resisted that kind of simplicity. Its failures were distributed among fear, convenience, pride, money, memory, and the quiet hope that someone else would carry the difficult portion. Its repairs had to be distributed too. Near midnight, Marion counted the signatures. They had enough founding commitments to support the 90-day request, not enough to create a trust, not enough to guarantee insurance, not enough to save the bridge, but enough to show that the proposal was more than paper. Outside, the wind continued sweeping snow across the darkened lantern route. Inside, the presses ran beneath warm lamps while people folded pages, compared figures, and signed their names beside the work they were willing to do. Adam stood with Clove against his leg. For years he had believed being needed meant becoming responsible for everything. That night he saw another possibility. A person could carry one part, then trust someone else to carry the next. The morning after the Lantern Festival arrived without ceremony. Snow had stopped before dawn, leaving Briar Glen under a hard white brightness. The sidewalks had been cleared in narrow paths, and the windows of the town hall reflected the pale river light. By 8:30, every seat in the council chamber was taken. Adults stood along the back wall, filled the side aisles, and waited near the open doors. Some had crossed Alder Bridge before sunrise. Others had driven in from the south side of town. Work boots left damp prints across the old wooden floor. Winter coats hung over chairbacks. Coffee steamed from paper cups despite the sign prohibiting drinks. No one obeyed that sign. Floyd Red had provided the coffee. He sat in the second row with a folder of written statements on his lap and a red brick-colored tie pulled slightly too tight around his neck. Beside him, Tessa Muir held 2 copies of every document in the hearing packet, 1 paper and 1 digital. Marion Vale occupied the end seat, her brick-red canvas bag open at her feet. Colored tabs rose from the files like a small city skyline. Beatrice Wynn sat in the front row. She wore a burgundy blazer, an ivory blouse, and the small bronze printing roller brooch that had belonged to her mother. Her silver bob was clipped neatly to one side. Clove lay beneath her chair, the German shepherd's golden black body curved around Beatrice's boots. Adam stood near the wall. He had chosen the position because it offered an unobstructed view of the room and the shortest path to the exit. He wore a slate-blue winter coat over his olive work shirt. His cognac gloves were folded inside one pocket. Floyd had saved him a seat. Adam had ignored it. "Coward?" Floyd whispered when their eyes met. Adam looked toward the council table. "Comfort enthusiast," he replied. At 9, Council Chair Eleanor Pike called the hearing to order. Eleanor was a compact woman in her early 60s with iron-gray hair and the calm expression of someone who had spent 20 years listening to residents explain why their particular disagreement threatened civilization. 2 other council members sat beside her, along with the town administrator and municipal attorney. Carson Penn occupied a separate table with his attorney and a representative from the lending company. He wore a midnight blue suit and a silver-gray tie. His portfolio rested closed before him. The survey barriers had been removed from the bridge approach before midnight. The disagreement from the previous evening had already entered the official record. Eleanor looked across the crowded chamber. This hearing concerns the winter use, maintenance responsibility, and future access conditions of Alder Bridge and its eastern approach, she said. It is not a referendum on anyone's character. Several people shifted. It is also not an opportunity to repeat rumors, insult neighbors, or perform for the local news. Floyd leaned toward Tessa. "There goes my opening." Tessa did not look at him. "You never had an opening." Lena Orton presented first. She stood beside a large display board showing the bridge in profile. Her cobalt inspection jacket had been replaced by a navy blazer, but the yellow mechanical pencil remained tucked behind one ear. The initial consultant's report identified legitimate areas of concern, she began. However, the report relied heavily on older inspection data, assumed limited maintenance after 2018, and presented the most conservative closure option as though it were the only available response. She changed the display. A photograph from the disputed appendix appeared beside a current image of Alder Bridge. The corrosion photograph included in Appendix D does not depict Alder Bridge. The connection pattern is different. That error reduces confidence in the report's documentation practices. Carson's attorney leaned toward the microphone. "Are you stating the report was fraudulent?" "No," Lena said. "I am stating it contained a material documentation error." The distinction disappointed some people in the room. Adam could hear it in their breathing. They wanted a villainous document, something false enough to burn and complete enough to blame. Lena gave them no such comfort. "The bridge also has real deficiencies," she continued. "The north chord shows measurable section loss. The eastern sliding assembly has been restricted by improper maintenance. Drainage near the abutment requires correction. These conditions do not support an emergency closure today, but they do require a formal maintenance plan and staged intervention." Miles Calder took her place. He carried no dramatic photographs, only diagrams, measurements, and a notebook filled with handwriting no ordinary person could read. "The bridge may remain open to pedestrians under temporary conditions," he said. "Those conditions include posted load limits, monthly visual inspection during freeze-thaw periods, immediate correction of the east drainage path, and temporary reinforcement before next winter." A council member asked, "Will the bridge need to close?" "For limited construction windows," Miles replied, "hours or days depending on the work, not permanently if the recommended plan is followed." "And if it is not followed?" "Then the condition will worsen." His answer fell without decoration. No one could accuse him of trying to win the room. Marion spoke next. She placed a copy of the original easement on the document camera. The old language appeared on the screen in faded type. "The public right of passage remains valid," she said. "It was never formally abandoned, extinguished, or transferred. The eastern property owner may impose reasonable safety controls during approved work, but may not reduce access in a manner that defeats the easement itself." Carson's attorney raised a question about liability. Marion answered without impatience. Then he raised another. She answered that too. By the fourth question, it became clear she had already considered every route he hoped to use. However, Marion did not exaggerate the strength of the community proposal. "Alder Crossing Trust is not yet incorporated," she said. "It does not currently hold insurance. It has no executed maintenance contract and no legal authority to assume ownership or operational liability." A murmur moved through the chamber. Marion waited for it to fade. "What it has is a completed draft structure, proposed directors, preliminary funding commitments, professional engineering support, and documented participation from residents and businesses on both sides of the river." She held up the thick folder gathered at the print shop. "We are requesting 90 days, not a symbolic transfer, not immediate ownership. 90 days to complete the work required for the council to evaluate a formal stewardship agreement." The hearing paused for public statements. Floyd approached the microphone first. His written testimony remained folded in his hand. "I own Lantern Spoon," he said, "which means I am professionally qualified to tell people what they should do while they are eating." A small ripple of laughter softened the room. Floyd looked down at the paper, then set it aside. "I supported Mr. Penn's lodge proposal last fall. My diner has had 3 losing winters. I saw construction workers, tourists, and breakfast tables filled again." He looked toward Carson. "I still believe this town needs business." Then Floyd turned toward the rows behind him. What I did not ask was who would pay for the kind of access the project required, not in dollars. In miles walked, in lost shifts, in people standing beside an icy road after the buses stop. He read brief statements from Maribel Santos, Vincent Lowe, Evelyn Marsh, and others who depended on the crossing. No one's story overwhelmed the room. Together, they changed its scale. The bridge was no longer a steel object on a planning map. It became a repeated act, waking before dawn, carrying groceries, returning after a night shift, walking home to someone who needed care. Floyd finished quietly. I wanted my fear solved. I did not notice I was handing the cost to people with fewer choices. He returned to his seat. There was no applause. Only the particular silence that follows an honest admission when no one knows how to reward it without making it smaller. Beatrice walked to the microphone next. Clove lifted her head but remained beneath the chair. Beatrice placed both hands on the lectern. Adam saw the slight stiffness in her fingers. Alder Bridge was built for workers, she said. Not as a monument, not as scenery. It existed because people had somewhere they needed to be. She described the paper mill, the transfer of the structure, the easement, and the decades when small repairs happened because someone simply saw what was loose and fixed it. That arrangement was never ideal, she said. It survived on memory, favors, and the assumption that the next person would continue what the previous one had done. She looked toward the council. We should not preserve that system. Several residents appeared surprised. I do not want Briar Glen frozen in the year the bridge was built. I do not want the print shop preserved as a room where nothing changes because someone I loved once stood there. Her voice faltered only once, on loved. Then it steadied. The past is not a set of instructions. It is material. We decide what can still bear weight and what must be rebuilt. Adam felt the sentence move through him. Beatrice did not ask the town to protect her building. She asked it to stop confusing preservation with refusal. Adam's name was called. He remained against the wall for half a second too long. Floyd pointed toward the microphone. Adam gave him a look and walked forward. He had spoken in mills, workyards, and maintenance meetings. Those rooms had required numbers, not vulnerability. This one required both. The east-bearing housing was over-torqued, Adam said. The sliding plate was scored. The drainage channel was partly blocked by survey material. Those problems can be corrected. He displayed photographs and a short mechanical summary. The bridge also has structural wear outside my license and authority. Mr. Calder's plan addresses that. I will not tell you volunteer labor can replace an engineer, a contractor, insurance, or municipal responsibility. It cannot. A council member asked why the community commitments mattered then. Adam looked toward the folder Marion had placed on the table. Because responsibility is easier to avoid when it has no names attached. He listed the offers: bookkeeping, material supply, administrative hours, fundraising, snow clearing on the approaches, record management. None of those things repairs a cord plate, he said. Together they show the town will not be assigning the whole burden to one property owner, one department, or one person who happens to know how to use a wrench. He paused. For years he had thought usefulness meant standing alone beneath weight. Now he understood the flaw in that design. A structure does not become weak because the load is shared, he said. It becomes weak when the load is transferred somewhere no one is watching. Adam returned to the wall before anyone could interpret his words as a speech. Carson presented last. He did not deny the consultant's errors. He did not apologize for using the report. He explained the lender's conditions, the project's financing, and the contracts already promised to local companies. The lodge can provide year-round employment, he said. Reducing the project may reduce those jobs. Removing access control increases financing costs and may make portions of the development impossible. Beatrice watched without expression. Carson continued, "I am willing to revise the site plan, preserve the easement width, disclose the full consultant report, and enter a development agreement contributing to bridge stabilization." His attorney glanced toward him. Some of those concessions had not been in the prepared statement. Carson adjusted one cuff. "I am not withdrawing the project," he said. "I am accepting that it cannot be built as though the public path were an inconvenience to be engineered away." It was not remorse. It was a boundary finally acknowledged. The council recessed for 40 minutes. People spilled into the hallway. Floyd distributed sandwiches from a box he had hidden under the clerk's table. Miles corrected someone who called the bridge basically safe. Marion refused to predict the vote. Adam found Clove beside the water fountain. She sat with one paw on his boot. "You did not steal anything," he said. Clove looked toward his coat pocket. "Do not ruin the moment." When the council returned, the room quieted before Eleanor lifted the gavel. The vote passed 2-1. Alder Bridge would remain open under temporary pedestrian restrictions and scheduled inspection. The town would retain ownership and primary liability during a 90-day transition period. Miles would conduct monthly assessments. Lena would oversee compliance and review all work near the eastern abutment. Alder Crossing Trust would be permitted to complete incorporation, insurance, funding, and a proposed stewardship agreement. Carson's Lodge project could proceed only after revision. The eastern approach would remain public. The development would be reduced in scale. The consultant's full report would enter the public record. Carson would contribute to stabilization costs as a condition of planning approval and submit future access work to oversight by a committee representing the town, residents, and independent engineering professionals. No one got everything. That was how Adam knew the decision might survive. 3 months later, winter had begun loosening its grip. Snow still remained in the shadows north of the river, but water ran freely through the restored drainage channel beneath the eastern approach. New temporary plates reinforced the most affected section of the north chord. Fresh inspection markers had been installed along the truss. The bridge did not look new. It looked attended to. Alder Crossing Trust had completed incorporation and purchased liability coverage after a difficult fundraising campaign that left Floyd permanently suspicious of insurance forms. The town approved a limited stewardship agreement. Ownership of the structure remained municipal, while the trust coordinated funding, public communication, volunteer administration, and long-term maintenance planning under professional supervision. Carson signed the revised development agreement in the council office. Beatrice was present. She did not shake his hand. He did not ask her to. Wynn letterpress changed too. A new sign appeared beneath the old one. Wynn Community Printworks. Tessa managed the daily schedule. Adults from across the town learned typesetting, poster design, archival scanning, and press operation. Beatrice taught twice a week, seated at the composing table when her hands tired. Her surgery was scheduled for early spring. She complained about it with such consistency that everyone understood she was afraid. No one mistook fear for refusal anymore. Adam continued living above Fenwick Mechanical. He still woke before dawn. He still preferred coffee too strong for civilized use. He still objected whenever Floyd refilled his cup without permission. Now he ate breakfast at Lantern Spoon every Tuesday and Friday. Floyd had placed a small brass plaque on Adam's usual stool. Reserved for the man who does not need company. Adam had tried to remove it. Floyd had used industrial adhesive. On a late February afternoon, light snow began falling over Alder Bridge. Beatrice stood at the western end in her wine-colored coat. Tessa had sent her to inspect a newly printed sign, though everyone knew she had simply needed air. Adam approached from the east with Clove beside him. The German Shepherd's maple leaf tag moved softly against her collar. Her right ear tipped outward beneath the snow. At the center of the approach, Clove stopped. She looked at Adam, then at Beatrice. Adam knew the expression. He put one hand into his coat pocket. The cognac glove he removed was old, darkened at the palm and softened by years of work. Clove watched it with complete attention. For once, she did not steal. Adam held it out. "Other fool," he said. Clove took the glove gently by the cuff. She turned and ran across the bridge. Snow lifted beneath her paws. The old steel span carried the rhythm of her movement over the river. Beatrice saw her coming. Clove placed the glove at Beatrice's boots and looked back. Adam had already begun walking. He did not call for the glove. He did not wait to be pulled. The bridge beneath him still required inspection. The print shop wall still carried cracks. Carson still had promises to prove. Beatrice still faced surgery, and Adam still carried losses no tool could reverse. Nothing had been restored to perfection. That was not what repair meant. Repair meant knowing where the weakness remained. It meant returning before failure. It meant accepting that weight could be shared without becoming less real. Adam crossed the last few yards. Beatrice picked up the glove. "You appear to have misplaced this," she said. "No." Clove stood between them, her tail moving through the snow. Below, the river passed beneath the old bridge. Behind them, Briar Glen continued with all its unfinished work. Adam looked toward the town, then back at the two figures waiting for him. For most of his life, he had believed a door left open was evidence of carelessness. Now he understood that sometimes it was an invitation. And sometimes, across a winter bridge, it was how people found their way home. Some burdens do not become lighter because they disappear. They become lighter because someone finally helps us carry them. Adam thought strength meant needing no one. But the bridge, the print shop, and one stubborn German shepherd taught him otherwise. A life is not weakened when its weight is shared. It is strengthened. Perhaps there is a door in your own life that has been closed too long. Perhaps grace is already waiting on the other side, asking only that you leave it open. Tell us what this story meant to you in the comments, and subscribe for more stories of loyalty, courage, and the quiet ways people find their way back to one another. May peace meet you wherever you are, carrying more than you should carry alone.